On today's Locked On Giants podcast, Nick Baumgartner of The Athletic checks in with his draft prospect observations, thoughts on the potential New York Giants draft strategy, and more. That is coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL in all lowercase letters to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Much appreciation to everybody who's for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, we're continuing our look at the draft with several draft experts that we've had all week long. And today we have Nick Baumgartner of The Athletic to talk about his mock draft, to talk about the quarterbacks, to talk about the sleepers and all the good stuff. Nick, welcome on into the program.
Thank you, Patricia. Good to be here.
Always happy to have you. Nick, I think we've got to start off with the quarterbacks. I mean, It's just been such a hot topic. There's been a lot of debate about whether Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, the top two quarterbacks in this class, are truly top 10 guys, let alone top 5. Where do you stand with regards to those two and where they fit into the draft order?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I think anymore, that definition of where a guy where he deserves to go or what he's worthy of, it's really dependent on the class, I feel like. And in this class, and it's a great point because I would not have either Sanders or Ward in any order in my top probably 15 if I was going to just stack the players. But, I mean, I think that in today's game, and I would have said last year, I would not have had Bo Nix or Michael Penix in my top probably 30, quite frankly, and they went as high as they did. So I think in today's world, I look at those guys and I say they're absolutely as good as Bo Nix and Michael Penix were, I think. Maybe in some cases a little bit better in some areas. So I think both of them are, worthy of top 10 picks in this draft, but they're the only ones. Like that's really where the line draws. And you are to a degree splitting hairs between Cam and Shedeur on a lot of areas because they are kind of close in that you notice a lot of people have them, 14, 15, 17, 18, whatever, it's back to back like that. So a lot of it'll be preference, but I think those two guys are, legitimate guys who can start for a football team. Like Shedeur reminds me a lot of Bo Nix. I think it would be a very similar thing if you surrounded him with the right people. So I like them both, but that's kind of where the line draws. And I don't think either is a slam dunk to not be a bust out. You know what I mean? So we'll see kind of what happens.
You mentioned that you're splitting hairs when comparing the two. What do you feel separates the two, and which one do you think would be a better fit for the offense the Giants run?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think for me, Cam Ward has a higher long-term ceiling. And for me, that's why I would probably have him still number one over Shedeur. I think he's bigger, stronger, a better athlete, I think, overall, even though Shedeur is a really good athlete himself. But Cam's got a better arm, I think. And there's more he can do. Plus, if you look at his history, he was a wing T quarterback in high school who played at a really small school level. And then, every other year, more or less, he went up in competition and excelled every time. He got better every single year. So I actually think that the track for him could keep going up and up and up, similar to what Jaden Daniels was able to do. I feel like there's a lot of similarities there between Cam Ward and Jaden Daniels. But Shedeur, I also really like for a lot of reasons too, and I think he would fit New York really well. I think Shedeur is actually more ready to play right now than Cam Ward is. I liken Shedeur a little bit more to Bo Nix, where I think you're going to need to help him more. But I like, Brian Daboll, I think is a really good quarterback coach. I think Shedeur Sanders is ready to go. I would not hate that pick at all. I would understand it if they took Cam Ward, but these guys need to win, and it's really going to be about if they think Cam Ward's ready to go, because I do think Shedeur is, and I think that's going to be the big question for New York when it comes down to it.
Nick, you look at the benefits of taking a quarterback in the first round and that you get the option year. How much do you think that maybe influences the board a little bit, where you have guys that maybe should be in the second round, but maybe they're leaking to the bottom of the first round because of that fifth-year option?
That is such a great point, and it is like the point of points when we're talking about quarterbacks and where they're drafted these days, because it just becomes a race to see, who's going to pull the trigger to get the guy they want. And like last year, it shocked everybody, right, to see Penix and Bo Nix go as high as they went. I think a lot of us all, looked at it and said they're second round quarterbacks. If we look at it in this comparing them to other players down the line, but it's also like, what does that even mean? I think you bring up the point about the option year. I think teams care so much about that they're willing to just say whatever. We'll jump the line if we have to, and that's why a guy like Jalen Milroe is going to be, the teams that are sitting there thinking they can get him in the second round. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're just going to be, so, like you said, somebody's going to say in the teens or wherever it is, like, we're going to do it because we want the extra year with him. He's not going to play for a year or two anyway. So, that's, and that's been more of an in vogue thing too, I think, in recent years. It's still not a developmental league, but I think more coaches and GMs are willing to let a guy grow a minute, than they used to be.
Another guy that I think has been generating a lot more discussion, and possibly a guy who can sneak into the bottom of the first round, Jackson Dart of Ole Miss. I mean, what have you seen from him, and do you think the hype that's starting to build around him is worth it?
I think it's a little much, actually. I don't know if I would. I mean, but it's the same, conversation. I'm fighting it for myself because I thought it was too much for Nix and Penix last year too, and both of those guys are better than Jackson Dart. However, this quarterback class is different. So there's a lot to like about Jackson Dart, but the thing you have to really get through here is that Ole Miss offense is not very little about what they do is translatable to the NFL. Matt Corral is a great example. It was a third round pick who was gone in a year. Nothing worked because it didn't translate. And, Jackson Dart's a better player than Matt Corral. He's a terrific kid, great leader. And I think those qualities, that he's a fighter and a guy that will hang in there, plus he's got a really good arm and a good frame to him, might be what gets him into the very, very bottom of the first round. I could see that maybe happening if a team, really, really likes him and wants to move up and get the extra year for him. But to me, he's a second round quarterback. I think he's a day two guy. But I guess, we'll see. But that doesn't always matter. You know what I mean? We'll see where it goes.
If the Giants don't go quarterback for whatever reason in the first round, and there's no guarantee, I know you had Cam Ward going to them in your mind draft, but if the Giants don't go quarterback, who then makes the most sense, and what round do you maybe project that person to be if they decide to even go with a quarterback this year?
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting because it feels to me that the ownership needs them to do something, needs them to be able to win and, win quickly. So it's going to be, if you don't get a guy up top that you think is going to be ready to start, it becomes a challenge because I don't think Milroe will be ready to start. Jackson Dart, it will just all be about your evaluation, whether or not you think he's, going to be able to do it or not. One guy that I think doesn't get talked about much, though, who I think is capable of doing this, is Tyler Shuck from Louisville, who was at the Senior Bowl, played pretty well there, 6'4", 225. He's only started 1 year, in major college football, but he played for Jeff Brom, was very good in that 1 year, and has all the sort of tools that you're looking for. He's a day two guy as well, but I think there's a lot of those guys, Milroe, Tyler Shuck, Riley Leonard, Quinn Ewers, McCord, Cam Miller from North Dakota State. Those are Will Howard from Ohio State, all guys that are maybe going to be looked at as day two guys, and I wonder where they're going to go because they're all solid, could be good high quality backups, but maybe not like a long-term starter. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of solid talent in the middle, but it's like, we'll see where it all starts and we'll see what the order comes off in.
Hey, Giant fans, if you love going to live events, you need to check out Game Time. Game Time offers an amazing selection of tickets at competitive prices, and they have made it easier than ever before to get tickets to your favorite events with their Game Time Picks feature, which filters out fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. That saves you all kinds of time. Game Time also offers flash deals to save you even more money on select events, and they make the ticket buying experience so easy. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What time is it? It's game time.
Nick, I know some teams, they kind of weigh the needs this year versus next year's class.
Yeah.
It's been said, and I don't know if you agree, but it's been said that next year's quarterback class is probably going to be a lot better than this year's class. That being said, I know there's risk reward in not taking a quarterback this year versus waiting till next year. If you're the Giants, what do you do? Do you say, look, there's nobody here that we feel is the next Eli Manning, so maybe we go with a Kerry Collins and wait until next year, or what do you think makes the most sense for them?
It really feels like to me, and I agree. I mean, next year's class has the potential to be very good, has the potential to be not just better than this year's class, but really, really good with some, depending on who all comes out and who doesn't. But yes, there's major risk in all that of kicking the can and not having a decision made and all that sort of thing. In addition to that, I really do feel like the Giants are in a situation here where head coach and GM, or at least one of the two, is kind of swimming for their life here. So they need to me, they need to find a guy here. They need to be aggressive if they have to. And if they like Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward or fall in love with one of them, then they need to go make sure that they get that guy. Like, to me, that it's time to do that. And it's time to give Daboll, I think, that chance to work with a young quarterback, because I think that he has gotten a little bit, it hasn't been perfect for him, but I think people have quickly forgotten how good of a job he did that first year with New York. I think Daboll's a smart coach. I know he's well respected. I would like to see him have a chance to work with a young quarterback who's ready to go. He worked with Tua in college, all these other, so I would like to see them go do it now, because I think either Shedeur or Cam Ward could probably give them what they need, given the rest of the roster, and they still have picks, beneath that are, they have a nice arsenal here this year. So everybody's got to do what they are, kind of paid to do. Joe Shane's got to be good at, underneath drafting and everything else, but I do think that it's time to go get a quarterback one way or the other for New York. I don't think they should wait.
Before we move off quarterbacks, I just want to get your take on where does Shedeur and where does Cam really need to maybe improve their game to be considered pro ready, or are they pro ready at this point?
So I think Shedeur is, matter of fact, I do think he is. He's going to have a ceiling on him based on his size and some of that stuff, similar to, like, again, to bring up Nick's, but he's a more athletic version of that. Similar to like a today's Russell Wilson a little bit, I think. I think he's ready to go. I just think that you're going to always have to have stuff around him. Like, he's not going to be able to come in and save anybody that's got a bad offensive line or can't run the ball. You're going to have to be able to run the ball for Shedeur. You're going to have to be able to run good routes for him. All those things. He's never going to be able to be like a Matthew Stafford type guy who can come into a bad situation and make it all look better. I don't think he can do that. And that's sort of, I don't know if he can improve that. I think his feet are good. His accuracy is good. He does everything pretty well within what he has, but physically he is a limited player. Cam Ward, and we just talked about how he's not as limited physically. He is more loose and careless at times, I would say, frankly. He needs to still learn how to be a quarterback. I think people have sort of forgotten he's only been playing quarterback for, in this capacity for like 5 years, his entire life. So it's not, he's still learning the sort of ins and outs of when to freelance, when not to freelance. And even though he is a little bit older, I think that that's something where, you might want to also have a veteran guy with him, just in case he needs to sit for a couple of weeks or whatever it is when the season starts.
All right, now, Nick, I want to talk about the rest of the draft, because obviously the Giants have other needs besides quarterback being one of their biggest one, but another big one, defensive line depth. They have yet to really replace Leonard Williams, in my opinion, but I also understand that this year's defensive line class is very, very deep.
Yes.
So assuming the Giants go quarterback day one, who are some prospects that maybe make sense for the Giants on the D line on day two, maybe even day three?
Yeah, it's going to be super interesting to see because, as we know, that whenever you have a good interior defensive line class, it's like are people going to jump early and try to get those guys, early in the draft, or are they going to all get pushed down? And I kind of feel like they're going to get pushed down based on, the needs everybody has in other areas. Like, I actually think that it wouldn't be crazy for a guy like Kenneth Grant, the kid from Michigan, that's a super athletic player that is probably a top 20 player in this class. I would not be shocked if he was still on the board at the top of the second round. TJ Sanders from South Carolina, same kind of deal. Alfred Collins from Texas, same kind of deal. Those are all first round level players. I think Jordan Phillips was the best player at the Shrine Bowl. He is definitely going to be there available for New York, even if they wanted to sort of move down. I think there's a lot of guys even that might even slip into the third. It really depends on who needs what in front of you. You know what I'm saying? But that is a spot that I do think it's very possible, depending on how some other positions grade out and do, that those guys get pushed down and teams got to wait. Because there is a lot of depth here. There's a lot of good players at edge and on the inside of the defensive line.
Is there an area in this draft class, and I know people will say, well, you can find good players regardless, but is there an area in particular, besides maybe quarterback, that maybe you feel scouts are not as enthusiastic about?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. The running back class is great. The receiver class is kind of, you don't hear as much about that one, as we have in recent years. The receiver class in the last 5 or 6 years, it's been, whoa, this is like every year it's been like there's so many guys. And there are a lot of guys compared to what we talked about maybe 10 years ago, but it's not as overwhelming as it was. Beyond, depending on what Travis Hunter does, if he wants to play offense, obviously he's terrific and elite. But really, we've seen classes in recent years with 3 or 4 elite receivers in them, and I don't think that that's the case here. I think you've got Hunter, Tet McMillan, and then that might be it. Luther Burden from Missouri is pretty good. He's athletic, but he's small. And then from there, it gets kind of, possession-y, if you will. So I think that class, there's decent depth in that you can find players in there that might surprise you, but not a lot of overwhelming talent in there.
What about offensive line, particularly tackle? How's that class shaping up?
That's another one where I think that people are still sort of, the jury might be out on how folks think on the overall depth of it. I think at the top, it's one of those where it's not great at the top. It's not elite at the top, but that, the middle of it again is kind of solid. Like Will Campbell is a great example. Will Campbell is a terrific football player, is going to be a pro for a long time, but, he's got short arms. And I think some people are going to like him as a guard more than they will a tackle. I think he can play tackle, but it's kind of that Rashawn Slater conversation from several years ago, and he ended up going towards the bottom of the top 10. So Kelvin Banks and Josh Simmons from Ohio State both have similar questions. They're really good players, but it's like everybody's got questions. There's no, tackle in this class. There's nobody that would, threaten to go number 1 overall or anything like that. So I think that that's kind of the difference here. Last year's class was great in terms of the depth and everything else. And if you didn't address tackle last year or the year before, then you might be a little, you got to do it quickly here this year, probably.
Now, I think I might have my timing correct here. I'm not sure, you can tell me, but I believe this is the tail end of the COVID class, the guys that were granted an extra year of eligibility due to COVID. Can you just talk about, how that whole process has affected the last few drafts with guys having an extra year? Has it made the quality better in some cases? Has it lessened it?
It's really interesting. When it started, when COVID happened, it threw everything, and the draft included, into haywire. The evaluations that year were a mess. People were all over the place. And I feel like the entire league needed to recalibrate itself after, 2021 or whatever it was, the year after that. And, since then, yeah, I do think that it's ended up being a good thing because it's given a lot of guys chances in middle rounds that otherwise would have gotten churned out, because we've seen guys via the transfer portal plus the 6th year. Because I think the transfer portal also was they took the restrictions off that during COVID too, and they just never put them back on. So that has helped a ton because guys have been able to move around, take the extra year if they need it. And then, Cam Ward is the great example, really. I mean, a guy that last year he was set to declare, and then somebody convinced him, go put your name in the portal and take the extra year, and, you're going to be eligible immediately no matter what. And he hit the jackpot. He got a bunch of money from Miami, played great, is going to get picked super high again. So I definitely think it's allowed players to slow down, especially linemen, to slow down and realize that it's okay to stay in school for longer than 3 years. You do not have to jump out of here. This is not the NBA. It's okay to wait. We've seen, older players getting drafted higher than they used to in some cases too, just because of necessity. And we'll see how that works out long term. But I do think it's been an overall net good thing. I wouldn't want it for long term though. This has got to stop at some point because the 6th-year guys, it's getting hard to keep track of everything.
Hey, Giant fans, the big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game, where one of the starting quarterbacks only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one or more correct pick, and you're cashing out. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the Super Sweet Millie winners' big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can split $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking to join an exclusive community of Big Blue Faithful where you can discuss the team and receive inside information in a toxic-free environment, then you need to check out Locked On Giants Blue Crew community. Members get access to our exclusive by invitation only Discord channel where we can talk with one another, ask questions, get breaking news, and so much more. Plus, as part of the Locked On Giants Blue Crew, I text exclusive updates and info directly to your phone, and you can communicate with me one-on-one via text. Come see what it's all about with a free 14-day trial. And when you use our promo code BLUECREW, you will get your first 2 months after your 14-day trial at 50% off the regular price of $4.99 per month. If you don't like the service, cancel before your trial ends and owe absolutely nothing. For more information or to register, visit joinsubtext.com/LockedOnNYGiants. And don't forget to enter that promo code BLUECREW, BLUECREW, at the top of the page for your 2-month discount after your 14-day trial ends. Text and data rates may apply. Please see your carrier's plan for details.
What about the effect that the NIL has had on the draft with guys wanting to stay in because of the NIL deals that they're working out?
Yeah, that keeps going up and up. Every year we see more and more of it. Parker Brailsford was the top center in the draft, and he went back to Alabama. He was easily the top center in the draft, and he went back to Bama quickly, right away. And it was like, wow, he must have gotten, a pretty good chunk of change there. It's not, Quinn Ewers, the kid from Texas, was offered a fortune by a few different places to go and transfer, and he decided he wanted to take a run at it. So it's another one of those things that has given players the ability to slow down and take a minute. Carson Beck is possibly the great example of maybe he'll turn into next year's Cam Ward, right? Like last year, if Carson Beck had gone out in last year's draft, he would have been a first-round pick. This year, he falls apart. His arm gets hurt at the end. In any other situation, he would have had to go pro and had no choice, and he would not have been drafted. And now he gets to go back. He's going to go play at Miami, and maybe he'll have, a terrific season and bounce back. We'll see. I think it's given guys that, the extra chance to have more than one life, because that's what football is, a hard game. We can't it can't be a perfect run for everybody all the way through. You got to have the ability to slow down a little bit. And I think that the NIL has really helped in that area as well.
Nick, every year it seems like the media, the fans are talking about guys, and there are guys in the scouting community that maybe they're talking about a little bit more than we are. What have you heard in that regard regarding some of these, under the radar prospects, if you will?
Yeah, there was a few of them at the Senior Bowl actually this last week. Mike Green from Marshall is an edge who's a little undersized. Started out at Virginia, I believe it was, and then sat out or didn't really play much his second year, but he was the sack leader in FBS last year. His really only year doing anything, but he is a phenomenal athlete off the edge. He's probably a little less than 250, honestly, 6'3", 250, somewhere in there. He's got the short arms and everything else, but when he brings the gas, it is like he was not on anybody's board when the season started, and suddenly he has probably got first round buzz from a lot of people. Another Toledo kid, we saw Quinion last year. Darius Alexander's a defensive lineman, edge, defensive tackle. He can play both. I think he's easily climbing into the top 50 conversation at this point, based on what he did at the Senior Bowl there. And I was going to say, Jack Beck, the receiver, the kid he was the story of the week there. His brother passed away in the New Orleans tragedy there recently. So he has been going through that, but he's also a guy who, he started his career at LSU with Ed Orgeron, he left because Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas showed up and were really good. So he lost his job. So he has to go and transfer, has a terrific year this year at TCU. And he was probably the best player at the Senior Bowl for my money in offense or defense last week. So I think he is a guy, it was Puka Nacua vibes, quite honestly, a guy that came and reminded scouts of who he was. I think he went from low day 3 guy when the season started to probably another guy who's flirting with the top 50 at this point, as another receiver who's really shooting up the board.
Yeah, right. I heard about Beck, actually. That was quite a story, and quite an inspirational performance.
For sure, yeah.
By that young man. Nick, I also want to ask you about cornerback, because that's another need that the Giants have. Now, I know there's Travis Hunter, but it doesn't sound like Travis Hunter will make it to the Giants. And I'm not even sure if he's going to be cornerback or receiver or what he's going to play. But who are some of the cornerbacks in this class? And is it more heavily a perimeter class or a slot class?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixture of both, because there's a lot of guys that can do a little bit of each. There's a lot of versatility in this class, especially in the middle rounds. As always, there's always good corners, just like receiver. There's always good corners in the middle of the draft. But the top this year, other than Hunter, who is easily the best corner in the draft, whose best comp is probably Charles Woodson, quite frankly, which is really rare air. Will Johnson from Michigan is a bit of a polarizing prospect. A lot of scouts still have him as like a top 5 player in this class, no matter what, even though he didn't do anything this year. He was hurt a lot. Some people questioned how hurt he really was and wasn't and all that sort of stuff. He's not going to run great. He was never going to run great. And I doubt he'll run at the combine, but he is a really, if he falls or slides or something like that, he would be a steal for somebody. Another guy that's injured right now, or overcome, Siobhan Revel from Eastern Carolina, who's built a lot like Tariq Woolen, the big long corner from Seattle. And then a guy I love, Jahdae Barron from Texas, who's kind of a safety / corner / slot who can do kind of everything. That's the theme we've seen in recent years. There's not really, if you play outside corner, you got to learn how to play inside. You got to learn how to do everything. They want everybody nowadays to be able to do it all. So I think that's been well represented in this class in general.
And then, Nick, with the combine coming up, obviously it's the underwear Olympics, and so not a lot gets put into that. But that being said, there's still testing, there's still interviews and stuff like that. Who are some of the guys that you think can really take advantage of the combine, the interviews, the workouts, if they choose to participate? Guys that maybe teams might be on the fence about.
Yeah, there's a bunch of offensive linemen, I think, that are in exactly that situation. Essa Pohl, a kid from Washington State, is a left tackle who is a phenomenal pass protector, phenomenal athlete, but has only been playing football for like literally 4 years. Like, that's it. He did not play in high school, like, at all. So I think he's a guy that if you got around and got a chance to be around him more. Charles Grant is another one, a kid from William and Mary, who is super talented, really long, and didn't get a chance to do anything at the Senior Bowl or anything else. So like, if he can go and meet with people and all that sort of stuff, guys like that, I think it's super important for them. Even some of the other, Jackson Slater was another kid at the Senior Bowl who was very good, and along with Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Like, they'll have a chance to meet with these scouts or meet with the GMs and coaches in situations that, otherwise they weren't, because these guys can get around. They go to SEC games, they go to Big Ten games. So it's not, Shedeur Sanders and these guys have already met most of these coaches, you know what I'm saying? So for these guys to be able to go up there and do that, I think will be super important. And that's really the only value left, I feel like, in the combine, is that it gives the opportunity for the teams who bring whatever personnel they bring to sit with the players for an hour, whatever it is, 40 minutes. It's not even an hour. But that's really the biggest value to me that's left of the whole event.
Okay, and then final question for you, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, so I apologize. But
no problem.
If there is something, what do you anticipate might be the draft related move that nobody sees coming? Something that maybe you're hearing through the grapevine or through your film study. You say, nobody's talking about this, but I think this might happen.
Yeah, I think it's, the thing that I'm interested in is how many quarterbacks are going to go in the top, let's say 50, because this is not a very good quarterback class by any stretch at all. But the thing that you keep hearing and the thing that I keep sensing anyway is there's so many teams that either need a starter or have a starter that they don't love, but also need to improve their backup situation desperately. There's a lot of teams right now that are they need another quarterback in here. We need a young quarterback in here. So to me, it feels like it's, even though there's not going to be a lot of love for a lot of these guys in traditional scouting sense. A guy like Will Howard wouldn't shock me at all if he ended up going way higher than people thought possible when the season started for him, or Cam Miller, the kid from North Dakota State. It's not going to surprise me if we see a ton of quarterbacks go off the board in the first 2 days of the draft, just because there's such a drought of quarterbacks right now in the NFL. And I think teams are probably willing to just take a shot on some guys.
Nick, I appreciate you coming on, as always. Some great stuff. He is Nick Baumgartner. He's with The Athletic. He's got a new mock draft out. Just put it out a few days ago. Giant fans, I think you'll like it. If you want to, I don't want to totally use it, but I think Giant fans are going to like it. Particular one, so do check it out. Giant fans, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. Appreciate you spending part of your day with us here. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode of the Locked On Giants podcast. For Nick Baumgartner, I'm Patricia Traina. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.